Now here's something that is just incredible that I want to share with you in what little time we have left. Boy. Some phrases. Phrases, when the Jews study the Bible, they look at phrases that are repeated. They usually have great significance. Well, let's look at Matthew chapter 27, verse 1 through 4. Here it says, it became early in the morning. All the chief priests, the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. So they're having this little group meeting. And it says, when they had bound him, they led him away, and they delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then, basically Judas, he who betrayed him, seeing that he was condemned, sorrowing, Judas returned the 30 pieces of silver again to the chief priests and the elders. Now, before I go on, do you know why Judas was sorrowing, why he was upset? This is just another way of looking at this perspective. Some people believe, as you know, Judas was a zealot. Judas wanted to overthrow Rome. Okay? Judas hated the Romans, and he thought Yeshua was the Messiah, but he was looking at it from a wrong perspective. He believed he was the Messiah, but he was thinking of it, he's going to come and destroy Rome. And some people think that what Judas was doing was trying to put Yeshua into the position where he would have to declare himself the Messiah and overthrow Rome. So some people think that was his motivation, trying to put Yeshua between. He thought Yeshua was going to overthrow Rome. He really did. So he was setting him up to where he would have to play his hand or die, thinking he was going to overthrow Rome finally. But that's not what happened. And then when he saw he was condemned to die, then he's all upset. Oh great, I played this card and it backfired on me. And oftentimes we try to do God a favor too, don't we? And sometimes we need to just stay out of the picture and let him do what he wants to do. But anyway, look at this phrase here. Judas says, I have sinned and I have betrayed innocent blood. But look what the chief priests and the scribes said to him. What is that to us? You see to it. Notice that phrase. What do they say to him? In other words, it's your problem. You see to it. Now watch what as this unfolds. In John 18, 31 and 32, they took him to Pontius Pilate the governor, and Pilate says to them, you take him and judge him according to your own law. Then the Jews said to Pilate, well, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. Now what is that all about? I've said this many times, but I'll just go over it quickly for those of you that are new here. Just like we have city courts, state courts, federal courts, they had, little bet dens over the synagogues. Then they had a small Sanhedrin. Then they had the great Sanhedrin, which is like the Supreme Court. Just like no city court can put someone to death, that would be up to a state court or a federal court. Well, in the Jewish court system, no Beit Din could condemn someone to death, neither could the small Sanhedrin. Only the great Sanhedrin was allowed to condemn someone to death. Well, what happened, because of all the political corruption that was going on, they couldn't force the law. The great Sanhedrin left what was called the Chamber of the Hewn Stone and met in another place on the Temple Mount. Because they did that, they could not enforce the death penalty, according to the Jews. And so they're saying, according to our law at this time, we can't commit anyone to death because the great Sanhedrin has left the Chamber of the Hewn Stone. Well, the Yeshua did this because what was the Jewish method of killing? Stoning. But he didn't want to be stoned. He wanted to be crucified in the great scheme of what God was doing. So he had it set up that happened purposely so he would be crucified and not stoned. That was the Roman method, not the Jewish method. And so in Matthew 27:17, I think this is kind of fascinating. It says, therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said to them, well, whom do you desire that I release to you, Barabbas or Yeshua, who is called Mashiach? Well, you know what Barabbas means. Bar is son, Abba is father. So you have two sons of the Father there. You have Yeshua, the son of the Father, and you have Barabbas, who is the son of the Father. You have a choice you have to make. It's almost like a type of Antichrist, Barabbas. But now watch what happens here. This is what is so incredible. Look at Matthew 27, 24, and 25. Remember the Sanhedrin, or the chief priests, I should say, and the elders told Judas, when he said, I betrayed innocent blood, they said, it's your problem, you see to it. Well, now these same people are before Pilate, and look at Pilate's words to them. He says, when Pilate saw it gained nothing, but rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I'm innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. So he's turning their words right back on them, putting on them the responsibility for killing the Messiah. Then all the people answered and said, let his blood be on us and on our children. Now again, a lot of people think that this curse fell upon all Jews. No, it did not fall upon all Jews. It was upon those particular Jews that made that comment there at that time. But I think it's interesting how they're almost reenacting the garden with Adam and Eve trying to place the blame somewhere else. You know, the Sanhedrin were trying to place the blame on Judas, and here Pilate's trying to place the blame on the Sanhedrin. But here's what is interesting that I'm going to want to read here. And Archer, Sarah, if you could, in my briefcase in the very back, I have the book of Josephus I forgot to bring up here, and I'm going to read you a little section out of Josephus concerning this comment that they made. Do you know, here they said, his blood be upon us and upon our children, remember? Josephus lived during the time of Messiah, and this is what he literally wrote. Exactly 30 years later, or just right at 30 years later, on the very spot where they had made that comment, judgment was pronounced and 3,600 of them died from the governor's fury, and they were scourged and crucified right over against the praetorium where they had made that comment. This is read in Josephus's book, The War of the Jews. It's the second book, chapter 14, and 8 and 9. And so here they just got done saying, may his blood be upon us and upon our children. At that very same spot, here's the event that happened. The guy instead of Pilate is now a gentleman by the name of Florus. And it says, now at this time, Florus took up his quarters at the palace. And on the next day, he had his tribunal set before it and sat upon it, when the high priests, the men of power, so these are like the very same people in the very same positions, and those of the greatest eminence in the city came all before that tribunal. So again, these are going to be your wealthy, corrupt religious leaders, politicians. Who else would have an audience with Florus anyway? And upon which Florus commanded them to deliver up to him those that had reproached him. There were so many Jews that had reproached Florus, and he wanted to know who did it. And so, just like in school, you know, find out, okay, who did this, otherwise the whole class is going to suffer. Well, here's what happened. It says, Florus commanded them to deliver up to him those who had reproached him, and told them that they should themselves partake of the vengeance to them belonging, if they did not produce the criminals. But these demonstrated that the people were peaceably disposed, and they begged forgiveness for those that had spoken amiss. In other words, look, we're sorry about that these few did this horrible thing and reproach you. We beg forgiveness, but we don't want to turn them over to you, and we don't want to participate in harming them. Well, Florus was more provoked at this, and he called out aloud to the soldiers to plunder that which was called the upper marketplace, and to slay such as whoever they met. So the citizens fled along the narrow lanes. The soldiers slew those that they caught and brought them before Florus, whom he first chastised with stripes and then crucified. Accordingly, the whole number of those that were destroyed that day with their wives and their children were about 3,600 people. So here they had made that comment, and 30 years later, at the very same place, that happened to them and their wives and their children.